Okay, let's go ahead and start this morning. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time today. The subject of our webinar is reporting EPP data for the 2019-2020 reporting year. I'm Lori Ayers, and I'm going to be your presenter today. As you heard, Mark is also on the line, so he may chime in periodically and make a comment. We will try to cover everything thoroughly today. However, we know that you may have additional questions, including those that may be specific to your EPP. So please send them our way and we will respond after the webinar, either via an FAQ or in a phone call or email if the question is specific to your EPP. Please note that your questions will be captured in the question section on the GoToWebinar toolbar. So comments placed in chat will not be retained. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording and related FAQ document will be posted on the Program Provider Resources page on the TEA website. Before we get into the reporting detail in this webinar, let's take a step back and get some context. Texas Education Code, I'm sorry, I'm skipping ahead one. This is the agenda and our purpose today for this webinar. We're going to be providing you with some information and guidance around how to report your EPP data that's generated in the 2019-2020 reporting year. In addition, we will go over some of the updates in the areas of program accountability that have been affected by the COVID disruption. Finally, we will point out some resources that are available to you to assist you with reporting. As we stated earlier, your questions are welcome, and we will be collecting them in the question section of the GoToWebinar toolbar. So here we go. Some context. Texas Education Code, or TEC, and/or Texas Administrative Code, or TAC, require EPPs to report specific information and data to the state annually. Some of the data the EPPs report and/or TEA collects is used to determine EPP accreditation status. Other data is required because TEA must provide that data to consumers. Either way, it is important that whatever data is reported or collected is accurate. The Figure 19 TAC 229.1c contains information about data calculations used to determine EPP accreditation status and the performance standards that EPPs are expected to meet. The Figure 19 TAC 229.3F1 contains additional information about data that is required to be collected from EPPs. One thing I want to note before we move forward is that due to the COVID disruption, the 2019-2020 reporting year will be report only, meaning EPPs are required to report data as it is written in TAC and TEC, but there will not be any accreditation decisions made on that data. Let's look at the next slide now that puts some detail around this. Because of the disruption caused by the COVID pandemic, some rule changes have been proposed to the ASEP regarding EPP accountability and accreditation for 2019-2020. If the ASEP approves the rule changes in October, then EPPs will be given an accreditation rating of not rated, declared state of disaster for the reporting year 1920. Which is a decision that is in line with the approach that has been taken at the K-12 level. This would limit the impact on EPP accountability of candidate testing, field supervision, and the various required surveys that were disrupted due to COVID. Again, these updates are still to be approved by the ASEP. Additionally, it is important to note that the requirement for EPPs and for TEA to report data has not been waived. Data must be reported and must be complete and accurate, even if it is not used to determine EPP accreditation status. Before we talk about resources, let's norm on some terminology that will be used in the training this morning. The term EPP refers to an educator preparation program, which is the entity that holds the county district number. The EPP is responsible for reporting required data for all programs within that EPP. The term program will refer to any of the certification avenues within the EPP. For example, undergraduate teacher certification is one program within a university-based EPP. Likewise, the post-bac principal preparation program would be another program within the EPP. Alternative teacher certification could be yet another program within a university-based EPP or any other EPP, and so forth. The term class represents the SBEC-approved certificate area. The possible certificate classes that an EPP could be approved to offer are teacher, principal, superintendent, school counselor, educational diagnostician, school librarian, and reading specialist. Pulling all of these terms together, a large university-based EPP, for example, may be approved to offer numerous certificates in several or all certificate classes and in 3 routes: the undergraduate, post-bac, and alternative certification, which would mean that EPP would be responsible for reporting the data for all of those different programs operating under that EPP's county district number. Additionally, you're going to hear me refer to teacher candidates and non-teacher candidates. Teacher candidates are individuals enrolled in your EPP pursuing certification as a classroom teacher. Non-teacher candidates are pursuing certification in any other class except teacher. These would be your principal, superintendent, school counselor, educational diagnostician, school librarian, and reading specialist candidates. Here's some perspective on where we are in the reporting cycle for those who are new or who have been focused on COVID-related issues and have pushed aside ASEP reporting. Note the gold circle. We are this close to reporting time. The timeline reflects that this reporting year began September 1st, 2019. Hopefully your EPP staff have been uploading data for all of your programs throughout the fall and early spring. In January, TEA sent you some mid-year data files to assist you in reconciling your 2019-2020 data up until that point. Normally, from that time forward, you would have continued to upload spring data. Due to COVID, you may not have had much data to upload after March. Here we are now in August, and state reporting for 2019-2020 data is right around the corner. The due date doesn't change since it is written in TAC. It's still on or before September 15th. And the data you report does not change because, as we just learned on a previous slide, the data reporting requirements in TAC have not been waived. There are some resources to assist you with data reporting. The reporting manual is available on the Program Provider Resources page. It was updated most recently this week to coincide with this training. This manual has many how-to screenshots and instructions, so I won't be covering the mechanics of uploads and data entry in too much detail in this webinar. The updated version of this manual is expected to be posted today on the Program Provider Resources page. Additionally, your program specialists are always a resource, including for state reporting. Note that Betty Flores is no longer listed as on our team. We do miss her a lot, but you will also see that we've added 2 new members, Angela and Emily. They have already proven to be fantastic additions to the Ed Prep team, and we are glad they're here. When you do need to seek assistance from a live person at TEA, please make your first stop one of the program specialists. We can usually provide the assistance you need, and if not, we will pull in Mark or Tam or others for additional support. Mark is definitely the expert on data and reporting, but he is only one person. So if everyone calls him directly with questions about state reporting, the call volume gets overwhelming. So during state reporting time, unless you're just calling to say howdy to Mark, please call the program specialist first for assistance. To assist you with reconciling your data, you can expect to see some preliminary data sets of admissions data and observation data delivered by secure email to your legal authority or primary point of contact and to the certification officer or designated ASEP reporting staff by Friday, September 4th, 2020. This is an overview of what you should have completed or should be in process of completing to prepare to submit your data on September 15th. First, you should be tracking the number of applicants that applied to the EPP in all programs from 9/1/2019 to 8/31/2020. Second, you should ensure that all candidates admitted to the EPP in all programs from 9/1/2019 and after have a complete admission record. Some of you have created admission records, but have not reported subject-specific content hours and the related GPA for your teacher candidates, or have not reported SAT, ACT, or GRE scores if applicable. Admission records should be reviewed and updated where necessary, so they are a complete and accurate representation of all required areas for that candidate. Third, you should have updated or should continue to update your candidate's status on the finisher records list. Your options are other enrolled or finisher, or you've removed the candidate. Note the last to-do item reminds you that reporting observations is required now for all teacher and non-teacher candidates completing clinical teaching, internship, or practicums in all of your EPP program areas. If you have not started uploading observations, you are strongly encouraged to do so now. If you wait until the last minute, ECOS may be overwhelmed with users and tends to slow way down at that point. EPPs must report admissions data. Thanks to technology fee funds, we have been able to make the GPA spreadsheet a relic of history. Using the admission pages that were debuted in ECOS beginning September 1, 2019, TEA can now capture all required reporting around admissions from the admissions records, so we no longer have to rely on the GPA spreadsheet. If your admission data in ECOS is complete and accurate, then TEA can capture the data that we are required to capture from those records. Actually, let's take a minute here to sidestep and brag on the admission pages, which were designed to save EPPs a whole lot of time and effort. In addition to eliminating the need to create a GPA spreadsheet, when you create an admission record for a candidate, the system courteously places the candidate onto your test approval list for each test required for the certificates you identified in the admission record. The status, of course, is eligible because the EPP determines test readiness and when to approve testing. Additionally, the candidate is placed onto the finisher records list with a status of other enrolled. As we said earlier, you will need to ensure each candidate admitted from September 1st, 2019 through August 31st, 2020 has an admission record that completely and accurately reflects the area or areas in which the candidate was admitted and all admission data for that candidate, such as GPA, subject-specific content hours, and so forth. Admission records can be created either individually by using the admissions search option in ASEP, or if you have a bunch to enter, prepare a CSV file and upload them using the Upload Admissions option. I must note here that the admission record is supposed to be created within 7 days of the date of formal admission, so most of your candidates should have an admission record. That makes your data review and reporting much easier. The technology fees collected each year have allowed TEA to not only make numerous system updates, but also to stay on top of any quirks that may appear in our systems from time to time. We'll talk about 1 or 2 current quirks in a minute. But overall, the new admission pages seem to be working well. As always, if you see any issues pop up, let us know right away with screenshots if possible. That said, when an EPP contacts TEA that the admission pages are misbehaving, there are some standard checks that we go through to help determine the source of the error. When we hear that an admission record is throwing an error message and the admission record does not save, we look to those error messages. The system will not let you add someone that is already listed on a finisher records list with a status of other enrolled or finisher in any program in the same certificate area. This helps EPPs keep their data clean, and the related error message is reliable. And I think now, for your convenience, the error message even identifies the county district number of the EPP in which the candidate is already enrolled, so that you can reach out to the other program as necessary to straighten out your records. Also, if you are using the bulk upload and it fails, you may get an error message that specifically identifies the error, or you may not. The first step with a CSV file is to check your formatting on that file. If you open your CSV file with Notepad, you can pretty quickly spot formatting errors. In that case, just correct the error in Notepad and save. We will actually have a slide later that shows that process. Also, when creating the admission record, all of the certificate and route identifiers must agree. The certification route must agree with the cert license ID selected for the certificate, and the certificate must agree with the role. Notice in the picture, the candidate is enrolled in an alternative certification route seeking LOT Spanish. The CERT license ID for Lote Spanish alternative is 1262, which is different than the CERT license ID for Lote Spanish for an undergraduate or post-bac route. Finally, Lote Spanish is a classroom teaching certificate. If you were to choose, let's say, principal as the role instead of classroom teacher, you should get an error message. Now for the quirks. There are a couple of known issues and some suggested workarounds to save you time and frustration. First, when creating an admission record for a reading specialist, you just need to remember to use the roll code for a teacher, which is 029. There was an old roll code for the reading specialist, but the system does not see it now. Your life will be easier if you just select 029, which the system likes for a reading specialist and for a classroom teacher. As many of you have reported, the admissions search page is misbehaving a bit right now. When you enter a TEA ID number into this interface, whether to search for a candidate you've admitted or to create an individual admission record for a new candidate, you may get more than one possible error that occurs. First, the system may tell you the candidate does not exist. This could be true if the candidate never set up an ECOS account and truly does not have a TEA ID number. However, this may well not be true, and the candidate may already be in the ECOS. You won't know that for sure unless you attempt the search using the Social Security number. The other error that could occur when you search for a candidate using the TEA ID number is the circle of doom that turns and turns, and when it finally stops, you get the dreaded URL server error screen. Neither of these issues is convenient because many of you enter your admission records using the admission search screen. The good news is the functionality is being worked on now and will be restored. The not so good news is that you may be trying to create admission records for candidates now, and functionality presently is not restored. The workaround is to search by Social Security number, or if that is not available, use the Upload Admissions feature by placing candidate data onto a CSV file and uploading that way. If you are not accustomed to using a CSV file and need some assistance, please reach out to your assigned program specialist and we will be happy to walk you through the process. We are frequently asked if the admission record should be deleted or changed if the candidate leaves the EPP after admission or changes certification categories after admission. The answer is no. The candidates leaving the program or seeking a new certificate category does not change the fact that the candidate was admitted in the original certificate category. Remember in an earlier slide, we pointed out that creating an admission record places the candidate into test approval and onto the finisher records list. If the candidate leaves the EPP, you will need to manually or through a bulk upload go into test approval and into the finisher records list and change the candidate's status in both areas to removed. If the candidate changes certificate area after admission, retain the written request in the candidate's record, and then go into test approval and into the finisher records list and update the information in each place to reflect the new certificate sought by the candidate. You can add or change either of those places manually or using the bulk upload. Do not alter the admission record and do not add a new one. Remember, admission of a candidate is an event, and the admission record is a snapshot of that event, so should not be altered after the fact, unless you made a mistake. Most of the admission record is set up so that it cannot be altered or deleted by the EPP after the EPP has saved it. If you created an admission record in error, such as if the person was not ever admitted, or you created the record with an incorrect TEA ID number, then you would need to contact your program specialist at TEA to delete that record. If you keyed in the incorrect route, for example, you would also need to contact TEA to correct that. Let's take a look now at some areas of the admission record that might need to be edited by the EPP. As you are reviewing admissions data to ensure it is complete and accurate, you may need to edit various numbers, either due to initial data entry errors or to add forgotten data such as SAT, ACT, or GRE scores if those are applicable to your EPP. If so, you can access the editable fields yourself, either through admissions search or through the maintain admissions options. Overall GPA and admission GPA are required to be reported for candidates in all certification classes. Subject area hours and subject area GPA are required to be reported for teacher candidates only. SAT, ACT, and GRE scores are required to be reported if they are collected. And we'll talk more about this on the next slide. If any of the other fields must be edited, such as if you entered post-bac but really intended to enter alternative for the route, or if you find the admission record should never have been created to begin with, as we said on the previous slide, your TEA program specialist can make the edit for you. Submit the request in writing via the help desk to educator preparation. Every year we get questions about whether or not to report SAT, ACT, or GRE scores. The rule requires that if your entity collects them, you must report them. If you are a university-based EPP and your university requires any of these scores for admission into the university, then your EPP must report them. Additionally, if an EPP requires these scores for admission, such as when the GRE is required for admitting a candidate into a non-teacher program with a GPA below 2.5, then you're required to report that score for the applicable candidate. Admission records are used in several ways. If you've not visited the new dashboards that have been developed by Mark's data team, I encourage you to check them out on the TEA website. Additionally, the EPP is responsible for maintaining an incoming class average of 3.0 or higher, which can be verified through GPA data collected from admission records. Finally, the technology fees paid each year by the EPP are determined based on number of candidates admitted in all certification programs within that EPP during the year. It is important that admission records are complete and accurate. Please take the time to review records to ensure they are complete and accurate before data is due on September 15th. Okay, we're going to move away from admissions and take a minute and look at reporting candidate enrollment status. The EPP must report the enrollment status of each candidate. This requirement has been in effect since the 2009-2010 reporting year. Prior to that year, only finishers were reported. You will find your old finisher lists up to the year 2008-2009 in the archived ASEP if you ever need to look at them. The current finisher records list is accessed via the Maintain Finishers link under the ASEP menu. The finisher records list that we use today is only one list that can be filtered 4 ways. You can generate a list that shows all candidates, or you can filter the list to show only candidates with other enrolled status, or only candidates with finisher status. Thanks to a recent update, you can now see candidates you have removed as well. One of the areas positively impacted by technology fees is this list. We have tried to clean this list up a bit. We've removed the old all but clinical designation and added the ability for you to see who you have removed. We've also tweaked the bulk upload process so that you can change the status of a large number of candidates simultaneously using bulk upload, which is likely pretty helpful to the larger programs. And speaking of large programs, your finisher records list should not time out on you now, which probably is also very helpful. We've also given the list a bit of a cosmetic makeover by removing extraneous columns and giving it a fresh new look. And speaking of fresh new looks, the Maintain Test list also got a makeover. We won't be talking about test approval too much today, but I wanted to call your attention to some of those updates there as well. You can now download your Maintain Test list into a TXT or a CSV file, and you can change test approval status for a large number of candidates simultaneously via bulk upload. Your candidates can be placed on the finisher records list in a couple of different ways. First, the candidates designated as other enrolled in 1 year will automatically populate the list as other enrolled in the next reporting year. In other words, they roll over. This is at once a good thing and a not so good thing. It's good because it saves the EPP work not having to create a new list each year. This feature can be not so good though when forgotten candidates who have left the program continue to roll over year after year unnoticed. It's important to review this list each year and make sure it is accurate, so forgotten candidates don't continue to roll over year after year. Creating an admission record also populates the candidate onto the finisher records list with a status of other enrolled, as we mentioned earlier. This is one of the features of the new admission pages that is a fantastic time saver for EPPs. When reporting the enrollment status of candidates, remember that everyone remaining in your program by August 31st is either a finisher because they have finished all of your requirements by August 31st, or they are still working on requirements, so they are other enrolled. Another way to look at candidates' enrollment status is this. Anyone who left the program or was asked to leave the program during 2019-2020 should have been removed from the finisher records list. All those remaining as of August 31st, 2020 need to have a status of finisher if they're finished, or other enrolled if they're not finished. I must note here that the fact that a person has or has not been recommended for a standard certificate or passed a certification exam is not used as a criteria for determining finisher status. The finisher records list should reflect exactly who is in your program and exactly who has finished in any given reporting year. It should also accurately reflect each certificate and supplemental certificate sought by each candidate in that reporting year. Remove candidates from the list or correct the information about candidates on the list as needed on an ongoing basis. Candidates who leave one route and then re-enroll in a new route may appear on the finisher records list as seeking the same certificate in 2 different routes, which is okay. For example, think about the teacher candidate that graduates non-cert from a university-based undergraduate program, then is admitted the following year to the alternative certification program at that university to complete requirements in the same certificate area. That candidate will be listed on the finisher records list in the traditional route and then in a following year in the alternative route. Candidates who quit the program or who are asked to leave the program should be removed from the finisher records list promptly at the point in the year in which they leave and should not be abandoned to roll over year after year on this list. The screenshot on this slide is an example that simulates a record for a former EPP candidate who called into TEA recently to find out what he needed to do to complete his preparation and become standard certified. When we reviewed his records in ECOS, we discovered information similar to what you see in this screenshot. The candidate was enrolled in the EPP for 2 reporting years and then left the program. He should have been removed from the 2016-17 list, but was not. This candidate told me he was employed for several years outside of education, so had no contact with the EPP for the 2016-17 through 19-20 reporting years. This individual should appear on this list only for the 2 years in which he was actually enrolled in the EPP. There are 3 different ways to add, delete, or correct candidate records on the finisher records list. First, you can search for an individual candidate using student search and update the record from the resulting student maintenance screen. You can also generate the maintain finishers list and change candidate status for an existing record from there. Don't forget to save it when you're finished. Finally, thanks to your ASEP technology fees, you can now use the bulk upload option to add or delete a record or change the enrollment status for one candidate or for multiple candidates simultaneously. Before we move on to the next section, let's take a minute and summarize some key ideas regarding reporting candidate enrollment on the finisher records list. First, if candidates leave your program, remove them from your finisher records list. Second, when candidates finish your program, update their status on the finisher records list. Third, if a candidate changes the certificate sought, including content area or route, update the finisher records list. And finally, if a candidate adds another certificate area, add another row to the candidate's record with the additional certificate. Okay, so let's take a quick minute and talk about the annual performance report. This is one area of reporting that TEA has been able to mostly eliminate thanks to technology fees, which reduces the work on the part of the EPP. Because we received questions about this report last year, we felt it was important to briefly touch on it this year. This is the annual performance report you've seen with your EPP. If you've been with your EPP for a few years, you may remember being required to enter data into this report. There is still an ASEP menu option to view the annual performance report, but the menu option to edit the report was removed before the 2018-19 reports were due last year. When I grabbed the screenshot the other day, I noticed the menu option to view this report was misbehaving. So I suggest that you just ignore this report altogether. TEA must still gather the information represented on this report, but we can collect most of this information by accessing data reported in other areas of ECOS. The only numbers that TEA needs from you but cannot access via ECOS are the applied numbers. There is no other place in ECOS for an EPP to report the number of individuals that applied to each of the programs within the EPP. So the EPP will need to report those numbers to TEA outside of ECOS on or before September 15th. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that process will look like. So if you think through the preparation process sequentially, an individual must first apply for admission to the EPP before he or she can be admitted into the EPP. EPPs are required to report the number of applicants that applied for admission to the EPP for all programs within the EPP during the reporting year. The numbers are reported as a total or all number, and then must also be disaggregated by gender and by race ethnicity groups. The number of applicants, or the applied number, must be equal to or greater than the number of persons admitted. Logically, an EPP cannot admit more candidates than the number that actually applied to be admitted. The process for you to report applied numbers this year will be the same as last year in that you will use this spreadsheet to submit the applied data. You will find the spreadsheet posted towards the bottom of the Program Provider Resources page on the TEA website. You can download a copy of the spreadsheet to your computer. When you open the spreadsheet, you will see that it contains two tabs at the bottom. The first tab contains instructions and asks for you to complete the information in the yellow highlighted cells. It is important to complete this information so that TEA knows who submitted the data. Under the second tab, there will be a chart with yellow highlighted cells in which you can record your actual applied numbers. To complete the all number in row 1, you will count the number of individuals that applied to any program within your EPP during the 2019-2020 reporting year. For example, you would include all of the individuals that applied to your teacher undergraduate program, your teacher alternative certification program, your principal postbac program, your superintendent alternative certification program, and so on and so forth. You will report all applicants as one number and will not report them broken out by program. Next, you will disaggregate the all number in rows 2 and 3 by gender, and then complete rows 4 through 7 by disaggregating the all number by race, ethnicity. When you're checking your work to ensure that your data is accurate, keep in mind that the total of rows 2 and 3 cannot exceed the all number in row 1. Likewise, the total number in rows 4 through 7 cannot exceed the all number in row 1. Also remember to check the applied all number in row 1 against your admitted number in ECOS to make sure that applied all number is greater than or equal to the admitted number. To submit the spreadsheet containing your applied numbers, use the TEA help desk. This is the best process to use since the help desk does not cycle out tickets the way our email does. So we don't have to worry about losing something you've submitted in the avalanche of emails we get during state reporting time. Submit the spreadsheet labeled as in this example that's on the screen in the blue column. Submit it to data reporting via the educator testing and preparation programs tile. There is no need to notify your program specialist that you've submitted the file since the help desk system will send us an email when your ticket arrives. Okay, now we'll move on and talk about observations, which are also required to be reported each year by September 15th. This year, formal observations for all candidates completing clinical teaching, internship, or a practicum during the 2019-2020 reporting year must be reported. As we recommended in January in our ASEP update webinar, we hope you have been uploading observations as they occurred throughout the year. This is an approach that can help you make sure you have not forgotten anyone so that your EPP can meet your 95% or higher completion requirement for field supervision. Programs must report observations completed in 1920 for all candidates in all classes completing clinical teaching, internship, or practicum. Some candidates may not have the required number of observations due to the COVID disruption. For this reporting year, you will use the CLIN 141, that's CLIN 141 assignment type, to report observations for clinical teachers as usual, but may also use CLIN 141 as the assignment type to report observations for candidates that completed a practicum. This week, you will likely have noticed a new assignment type added to your list of valid assignment types in ECOS. That assignment type is NONTCH, which you may use now, but in the future it will be the assignment type that you will use to report observations for non-teacher candidates that completed a practicum in a non-teacher certification area starting in the 2020-2021 reporting year. Again, these non-teacher areas include principal, superintendent, school counselor, educational diagnostician, school librarian, and reading specialist programs. If you've already started reporting observations for non-teacher candidates using the CLIN 141 assignment type, that is perfectly acceptable. Everyone will need to use the NONTCH assignment type for reporting practicum observations starting with the 2020-2021 reporting year. For your reference, the observation schedules for both teacher and non-teacher candidates are found in 19 TAC 228.35G for teachers and H for non-teachers. It's important to note here that although teacher observations must be 45 minutes or more in duration, observations for non-teacher candidates might not be. The TAC requirement for non-teacher observations allows some flexibility in that they must conduct a minimum of 3 observations that total a minimum of 135 minutes. If you do the math, that is the equivalent of 3 45-minute observations. But data that you upload for a non-teacher candidate could include one observation that was 25 minutes, one that was 60 minutes, and the third that was 50 minutes. This is acceptable for non-teacher observations, so you can report those with confidence. Formal observations conducted for teacher candidates must be 45 minutes or more in duration for each observation. As we said earlier, you may not have all of the observations that should have been conducted for each candidate due to the COVID disruption. Please make sure you enter the observations that you have completed. It is expected that candidates who were in assignments in fall 2019 should have all of the observations that were required to have been completed in fall, since COVID-19 was not an issue at that point. It is very likely that candidates in spring assignments could have received at least one observation before COVID forced everyone out of school. Even though EPPs will not be accountable for a 95% completion rate for the 1920 reporting year, the requirement to report the data has not been waived. So the expectation is that all observations completed in 1920 must be reported in 1920 in order to meet the data reporting requirement in 19 TAC 229.3. As we saw with the admissions data and enrollment data, the observation data can be added either individually per candidate or using a CSV file in a bulk upload process. You will report all formal observations conducted by the field supervisor and not just the minimum number. So if the minimum number of observations required for a clinical teacher is 3, but your field supervisors complete 5 formal observations for clinical teachers, then report all 5. On the other hand, do not report observations conducted by cooperating teachers, mentors, or site supervisors. Observations conducted by campus mentors is a best practice and one that most programs require. However, these are not reported to TEA. They should be retained in candidates' records as part of the completion documents that must be retained per the records retention requirement in 19 TAC 228.40F. Also, remember that you will not be able to report the observation unless the field supervisor that conducted the observation is listed in your field supervisor database. To access that, select the field supervisor's option on the ASEP menu. Technology fees have allowed TEA to tweak the field supervisor database by improving some of the functionality and also by building in the new non-certified option for field supervisors that do not hold a valid certificate. Prior to the newest updates, you may recall that field supervisors that were not certified educators in any state were identified in this database as being certified in the Yukon. After we added the non-certified option, our IT group rolled over those individuals from Yukon to non-certified. That said, if you have a field supervisor that really was certified in the Yukon, let us know and we can manually change the record back for you. Remember, observations that happen in 1920 are reported in 1920. To be successful uploading observations, here are some handy reminders. These reminders were developed from a list of common issues that arise each year around uploading observations. You will find additional tips for all uploads in the data reporting manual that's posted on the program provider page on the TEA website. First, remember the candidate must be on the finisher records list as other enrolled or finisher. Second, observations may be entered only into an unlocked year, which right now is 1920. Next, the yellow block is a reminder that observations must be entered into the year in which they occurred. If a candidate completed clinical teaching in 1920, but will not be a program finisher until the 2020-2021 reporting year, enter the observations for the 1920 clinical experience now, so that they can be attached to the candidate later in 2021. If the observations for a 1920 finisher were entered in 1819, we will find them and attach them to the candidate in his or her finisher year in 1920. This is, of course, dependent on the observations having been entered in the reporting year in which they occurred. The green block reminds us that the field supervisor must have a TEAID number to be entered into the field supervisor database. When entering the observation data, remember the observation date cannot be before the assignment start date. And finally, the ocean blue block reflects an important tip that we get lots of calls about throughout the year. The observation reporting system sees 3 certificate assignment types for internships. The intern certificate, or INT, the PRO, which is the probationary certificate, and the PROX, which is the probationary extension. We get quite a few calls from programs that get error messages and failed uploads because they attempt to assign an assignment type of PRO to a candidate who held a probationary extension. That will not work. Let's look at the assignment types more closely. In ASEP, under the Upload Observations tab, there is a list of assignment types. We found that representation to be a bit confusing, so we reorganized them into an easier to read version that you see on this slide. This version shows you more detail and divides the certificates into the 3 assignment types: the INT, the PRO, and the PROX. Take a look at the group labeled PROX. It's the group with the green highlight. This seems to be the assignment type that gives EPPs the most trouble, so let's look at this more closely. A candidate who is completing a 2nd or 3rd internship could hold a PROX certificate. This candidate would have a certificate called a probationary extension. The PROX is issued after the candidate has already held 1 probationary certificate and applies for another. ECOS automatically labels it an extension. So if the candidate held a probationary certificate, or PRO, during the 1st year internship, and then had to complete a 2nd internship year for some reason, the candidate would apply for another probationary certificate, but when it issued, it would be called a probationary extension, thus the PROX designation. The system is picky about this and doesn't really care in which year the internship occurred, only that the certificate was a PRO or a PROX. You can also see the clinical teaching assignment types displayed here and the new non-teacher option for practicum observations as well. This chart is in the data reporting manual, and we hope you will find this a useful resource. If you use the upload observations, upload admissions, upload finishers, or upload test approval features, and your upload file keeps failing, check the formatting. Sometimes the error messages don't point to the exact issue in a file formatting problem, and I find CSV files to be particularly ornery when it comes to missing data, stray marks, and table additions like column headers. An easy way to check for formatting errors is to first check the Excel file and make sure all cells in a column are justified the same, right or left as applicable, and make sure you've removed the column headers. Next, make sure you've saved it as a CSV and then close the file. To open the file in Notepad, you'll right-click on the file name and select Open with Notepad. You can see in my example that in Notepad, it is easy to see what is populated in all of the fields. Notepad will show you if there are extra spaces or stray marks. This example is an admission upload, which requires 16 fields to be populated, even if you are not reporting fields 14, 15, or 16, which are the SAT, ACT, and GRE scores, which are optional. In Notepad, you can just add commas as placeholders for data that is not being uploaded so that all fields are complete. Notice I added 3 commas to the end of my data set as placeholders because I did not report SAT, ACT, or GRE scores for this candidate. Also note in this file that my GPA numbers are 4s. They should be 4.00. So I could add the additional zeros in Notepad as well. Once I'm confident that there are no stray marks or spaces, I have all 16 fields populated with data or commas, and my numbers are represented to the correct decimal place, I can save and close and then upload this file. If you have upload issues and need a second set of eyes on the file, your program specialist at TEA can assist. Remember, if you must submit a CSV file to TEA for us to take a look at, please use the help desk system, which is secure and protects the candidate information that will be in your data file. There is an option to generate a report so that you can check the observations you have entered or uploaded for your 1920 candidates. From the ASEP drop-down menu, select Observations Report, and then filter the report for the 1920 reporting year. Select the observation type as View All Observations, and then select the academic year option. The observation report has been misbehaving a bit, and we are aware of it. However, if you filter the report using the parameters I have entered here, you can expect a reliable report. Please remember also, as we stated at the beginning in the resources section, TEA will send an observation data set to you in early September. If you have all of your observation data entered by August 31st, then the TEA data set will also be a useful resource for you as you check your work. In years gone by, EPPs were required to submit written exception requests for data points that they needed to have excluded from the various data sets used for accountability, or to exclude test approval dates from admissions data sets to accept them from technology fee calculations. This year, exceptions will not be necessary. Let's take a look. RFE forms, request for exception forms, are not required this year because data is report only and will not impact accreditation status. Admission records corrections can be made by the EPP or handled directly with your program specialist by submitting a written request to the help desk. If you find errors on your finisher records lists that occurred in locked years, there is a data fix request for that. Your program specialist will provide you with the form and instructions to request the data fix. If you need to submit a written request to TEA for assistance with editing or deleting an admission record, this is the minimum of information we need from you. Send the candidate name and TEA ID. Then you'll need to include specifically the information in the blue columns or the information in the green columns for each candidate in the request. If we are changing a record as represented by the blue column, let us know which piece of the record we are changing and what it needs to be changed to. Also, remember that if you change one piece of the record, you may need to change another to achieve agreement. In my example, I changed the route, so I needed to change the cert license ID to match the new route. In the second example, in the green columns, I identified the record to be deleted and the reason why. What does our reporting timeline look like this year? Well, I'm happy to report that it is very short. We can attribute this to a few things. First, there are no exceptions for TEA to process. Second, there's no admission data to reconcile since all admission data will be extracted directly from ECOS. And finally, TEA is providing data sets well before September 15th to give EPPs a chance to review, complete, and correct data before the due date. That all said, here's the timeline. You will get your admissions and observation data sets in early September, and then all data must be complete and accurate and submitted to TEA by 5:00 p.m. on September 15th, when ASEP will lock. All data includes admissions data, candidate status on the finisher records list, observation data, and applied data. TEA program specialists will review your data to ensure all data is there, and then your affidavits of data accuracy are due no later than 5 p.m. by the end of the following week. The 1920 ASEP will not unlock again for corrections, which is different than in past years. Please be very careful and deliberate about ensuring data accuracy. Admissions, finisher records list, and observations are all in ASEP. After ASEP is locked, you will not be able to go back and enter any data into the locked year. Before we close today, and while I have you all as a captive audience, these are some reminders that we feel are important, even if they are not directly related to 1920 data reporting. Looking ahead, candidates that were finishers and were placed on waiver pro certificates for 2020-2021 do not require field supervision from the EPP. Conversely, candidates that are enrolled and have been placed on waiver intern certificates do require field supervision. EPPs are accountable for observations in 2020-2021. All waiver intern certificates must issue prior to October 1st, 2020. And then changing pace a minute, changing course here, talking about the science of teaching reading. This is a reminder that the last day to issue a certificate in these areas without a passing score on science of teaching reading is December 31st, 2020. That includes the core subjects EC6, core subjects 4 through 8, English language arts and reading 4 through 8, and ELAR social studies 4 through 8. Please communicate with your candidates to take care of fingerprinting, paying for the certificate, and notifying you to recommend well in advance of the December 30 cutoff so that the certificate has time to issue by December 31st.
Hi, Lori, this is Mark. Real quick, wanted to say thanks everybody for joining us here as we're getting to the end. I just wanted to, note one of the things that is new this year is that we're the primary source of our data, which y'all report into ECOS, is the source of the data that we have, and so that September 15th deadline, as Lori covered, is the deadline as it is in rule. We're really excited about all the updates that we've been able to make into ECOS and working with y'all and over the past couple of years, and so we're excited to not have to be able to use the primary source of data as data. So we do just encourage and want to reiterate that is the requirement for all your data for 1920 to be in there and up to date by the close of business on the 15th. We look forward to working with you here over the next month and a half to support y'all in getting your data in there.
Okay, thank you. So we hope you have found this training useful. Please let us know if you have additional questions by either typing those into the question box or email your program specialist, and we'll create some FAQs to post along with the recorded webinar. Remember, if you need specific assistance as you work through your reports this year, please reach out to your program specialist. Also, the most efficient way to reach us during the time of COVID continues to be via email or help desk, since we may not be in our offices to answer calls. Stay well, and TEA wishes you successful reporting and a successful school year in 2020-2021.